Hey, folks, this is Rabble Rousing Rich Bergeron.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, Tornado Tony Panic here. It's like Tom Pettit with this crystal ball on fire.
All right, well, this week we should be coming in perfectly loud and clear. We updated my Audacity software, and I had an issue last week. We actually ended up losing a lot of you guys' audio because for some reason it just wasn't picking stuff up. And I've had that problem before, but by the end of the show, I had it so that it wasn't hiccuping at all. So I don't know what I did, but I've left the microphone settings alone. And it's working good tonight. So that's giving me some
Like,
pause in getting guests on. But now I'm gonna ramp up harder to try to do that. And this week I really didn't have a lot of time, literally like 10 minutes before the show to analyze some of these UFC fights, but I've got a pretty solid recommendation for the top four. And just to recap last week, we'll go into the whole card of UFC, but my best bet was, let's see, a one, two, three, four, five leg parlay with plus 4,029 odds that paid me $206.47 on $5 bet. So that ended with the win of Charles Johnson, who I had help with the experts because remember last week I didn't really have a good rundown of the fights. I was kind of doing it on the fly. But sometimes when you listen to the experts, they help you out big time, and sometimes they hurt you. Uh, big example. One of the experts I watched last and made a few bets based on his recommendations said it was an absolute lock that Damon Blackshear was going to beat Montel Jackson in the fourth fight of the night. And guess what? Montel Jackson took 18 seconds to knock out Damon Blackshear. So that was definitely not a lock. Thankfully, enough experts convinced me that Johnson was the way to go. So he was in my parlay. He led off my parlay, actually. That was one of them. And then, let's see. Oh, no, it was a six leg parlay. That was the second leg. The first leg was Luana Santos and Maria Agapova. Remember, we talked about Agapova had been moving camps like crazy. She was homeless and all this other stuff. Well, obviously, that private life issues were, I don't know if they were a factor, but it was good insight to have because she didn't last very long either. And I had that fight going under 2.5 rounds. It did not last the first round, which is actually kind of rare for female fights because you see the other two female fights, like I said, they typically always go to decision, and the other two did. But that one ended in the first 3 minutes and 27 seconds in. I also had in my parlay, as I said, Charles Johnson. That was a money line bet, and he won by knockout with just 20 seconds into the third round over Joshua Van. And it was a fairly close fight up until that point. And the same expert that picked Devon Blackshear had Joshua Van in one of his recommended parlays. A lot of people were high on Van, but Charles Johnson had just the better reach, the better strategy, the better game plan, and he came out on fire in that third round. I don't know what his corner said to him, but I mean, he just exploded with offense and just, I think he hit a Van with a picture perfect uppercut and ended the night for him. So that was good. That was the last leg of the parlay that had to pay off. Before that, also part of my parlay was Fremd and Petrosky. That fight, I had money line on Petrosky. Yeah, money line on Petrosky for that one. And then before that, the first fight of the night, I had Evan Elder beating Darius Flowers, money line. That one ended in a arm triangle choke, which a lot of people attempted on this card. It's kind of weird. It's like the submission attempt of the night. Petrovsky, by the way, beat Friend by unanimous decision. And Santos won by a rear naked choke submission. Okay, so let me get to Jasmine Vucedevicius. I also had her by money line in my winning bet. Now, my winning bet was probably $5 out of maybe $70 or $80 total spent on bets. I had a lot of losing ones. And I'm going to blame another expert. I'm not sure exactly who it was, but no, actually, most of the experts I should blame were the one that really destroyed a lot of my parlays. Because Julian Erosa, I did have. He was a surprise win. Um, that happened after the no contest of Cody Brundage and Abdul Razak Al Hassan. So that one affected a lot of my parlays after the Johnson win because that fight was voided. So no matter who I had on those parlays, the total of the winnings, if I won those parlays, went way down because that fight was voided. Now, if it had gone on, Abdul Razak Hassan would have got the first round knockout, which would have really helped me because I had him by knockout in most cases, and a couple of cases I had him by first round knockout. Then we had Julian Erosa beating Christian Rodriguez by a really last second. It was in the last 11 seconds of the round, first round, by a guillotine choke submission. And although that was kind of a surprise, a lot of people knew that was the possibility. Either Rodriguez was going to win by decision or knockout, or Erosa was going to get the submission because he's pretty good at that. So while I didn't win any big bets because of that win, I did put him as the MVP in one of my FanDuel lineups, which I started doing again on a kind of a whim. So that put me in like 206th place out of something like 5,000 people, and I didn't win the whole thing, but I got one of my best lineups ever just by picking him because he was so cheap, and then building a good lineup around him. So that was a good one. But then Gabriel Bonfim, I had picked him money line in most of my cases over Anjay Lusa. That was predictable. Gian Silva over Drew Dober. That was probably the fight of the night across the board. I don't think anybody would argue that because it was quite the war, and Drew Dober had one of the nastiest cuts I have ever seen over his eyebrow and did not seem to be fazed at all by it. He wanted to keep fighting. The doctor took a few looks at it before he eventually stopped the fight, just 1 minute and 28 seconds into the third round.
A very good stoppage.
Very good stoppage. And I actually had third round TKO for Jean Silva. So, and it just didn't pay off the whole parlay because it was part of a parlay. But I was excited for a minute because it depended on what happened in the next fight for that bet to pay off. And unfortunately, this is the one where I listened too much to the experts, and I picked Santiago Ponzinibbio on 99% of my parlays remaining. And he lost a ridiculous split decision. Now, I know MMA judging is a little different. You know, a lot of the people that do it are new to it. You know, a lot of people cross over from boxing. Um, but I blame not just the judges, but Ponzinibbio's strategy. He just seemed so gun shy. And he thought he could rely on a last second takedown in round two, and then, the same thing in round three. And then Salikov was just across the board dismissed as not being up to the task, not being too old, the list goes on and on. But Ponzinibbio came in there and just did not fight his fight. He was timid. Every single leg kick he threw pretty much was landing, and he abandoned those after a certain period. It was really pissing me off, especially considering all the bets I had on him. And then the decision got read. I really did think he edged it out. And on one card, one judge's card, he did, but the other two picked Salikov, and I just
Yeah, he wasn't sitting down on. Remember, he was going. Remember the nickname of his opponent, King of Kung Fu. And it didn't seem like Wing Chun Kung Fu doesn't have much movement. This guy was doing almost like Billy Self times.
Yeah,
So he a little bit of that Wing Chun stuff does seem to work. And he
yeah.
made, yeah, it was a close decision.
I guess
I
if
kind of
anything,
favor Santiago. We just do the dick.
yeah, I guess if anything, that was probably what the judges saw. As far as what Ponzinibbio was landing, it just wasn't doing the damage because he wasn't, setting his feet right. He wasn't following through. He was just so timid. Almost like he wanted nothing more than for the fight to go to decision. Like even when he seemed to have Salikov hurt, he just did not go in for the kill.
Yeah,
Like he
yeah,
showed way too much
exactly.
respect for a guy that he could have easily beaten by knockout. And most people predicted he would win by knockout. Uh,
As you said, he really needed that fight back on track. I mean, I don't think him all. I, if he watches the replay, he's going to really himself for not doing.
yeah, kick himself without sitting down on it. And then we have the main event, which was also very disappointing for me because, I did what I do in the last second and I placed like 4 or 5 bets just on the main event and round knockouts picks for Namajunas. I knew she was going to win, but I did not really expect it to go the distance all 5 rounds because it was kind of short notice for Tracy Cortez, number one. And number two, she had weight struggles. And number three, the first round featured a knockdown of Tracy and knocked her eyelash off. She had the fake eyelashes on, which I don't understand why you would do that for an MMA fight, but literally had her eyelash knocked off. And Namajunas put her on her ass. And that was it. That was really the only point in the fight where Rose seemed like she was um, capable of knocking her out. From that point on, Tracy figured it out a little bit, and while she was always losing pretty much every round, she was definitely not looking like she was going to get knocked out ever after that. So she learned pretty quickly to stay off the canvas as far as from punches, anyway. But it was kind of a boring fight, which Namajunas is capable of. She's just very smart about it. She fought her fight. She wasn't afraid to go the distance, and it is what it is. But I was hoping for a third or fourth round knockout. It did not come. So I had my one win on the first bunch of fights, and I was pretty happy with that. But felt like I could have done way better. I was very disappointed in Ponzinibbio. He kind of screwed me over because at that point I think I had 3 or 4 bets, and only one of them required a Ponzinibbio knockout. The other two were money lines, and Rose Namajunas money lines. So yeah, I would have won at least another $100 if that fight went the other way. But anyway, don't cry over spilled milk, right? This weekend, we're going to kind of wait on the UFC card this weekend, but we also just want to go over the results last weekend of the PFL fights. We had a middleweight main event from Saudi Arabia of Mustafa Rashed Nada over Abdel Rahman Bariai. And boy, Mustafa just fed off the crowd. He was like the hometown kid here, and it showed. Only took him 2 minutes and 34 seconds to knock out Dri. And I didn't wake up early enough to do the full card betting on this one. I had to start at like the fourth fight in because it must have been on a major delay. And that reminds me of a story I was going to talk about a few weeks ago of DraftKings actually just recently got in trouble. I think they had to pay like over $300,000 out in bets and fines because there was a PFL event they posted on their betting page that had already happened, and they were allowing people to place bets on it after it was over, and because it was on tape delay. So I guess they have cracked down on that because the tape delay here uh, was affecting the way that they allowed the bets to come in. So yeah, I ended up putting a lineup together, and I had Dri who lost in the one fight parlay that survived to the main event. So I really needed that UFC win, but I got it anyway. Co-main event, Muhammad. Of course, you got to have a Muhammad when you're in Saudi Arabia. So fight Muhammad Al Akra beating Yusuf Ubas by TKO. If he was American, I bet you his nickname would be Whoopas Ubas. He lost by TKO. In the third round, just 52 seconds in. And then we had Jarrah Al Salawi at welterweight beating Rayman Atamani by rear naked choke submission, just 4 minutes and 20 seconds into the first. Badruddin Diani at welterweight beating Amir Fazli by unanimous decision. Seventh fight of the night. Mohsen Mohadsifi over Josh to go. He took his knockout to go. First round, 3 minutes and 32 seconds in. Probably pronounces it Togo, but that's how it's spelled, to go. Suhail Tahiri at lightweight beat Ahmed Amir by unanimous decision. Omar El Dafrawi beating Anthony Zaidan by unanimous decision. In the fifth fight of the night, Patan Al Saif in the fourth fight of the night beat Iman Baraka by retirement. You don't often see a lot in MMA fights. After the second round, she just quit. I don't know why they say 3 minutes next to it, but it was literally after the second round. She did not want to come back out for the third. And that was kind of funny to me because I don't know how many female fights I've heard about in Saudi Arabia. I thought that was weird that they even had one on the card because they're not very well known for human rights, and female rights.
I didn't even know you have cards in Saudi Arabia. Emails on the card. They they can't wear like short shorts or anything like that. They just wear mid to like even like the bottom is covered. Like they have to wear like almost the full body. It's not
Well, I know in like Olympic judo tournaments and stuff and jiu-jitsu tournaments, they do have to wear the hijab, just the face covering, but it doesn't have to cover their face, obviously, because they won't be able to see. But they have to wear like that hood, which is crazy, but it is what it is. Anyway, third fight of the night, Abdullah Salim beating Omar Reguigui by triangle choke submission. 1 minute and 29 seconds in. And George's Eid beating Abbas Khan by unanimous decision before that. And then Ziad Ayman over Hadi Omar Al Husseini by rear naked choke in the third round, 4 minutes and 24 seconds into that one. And we talked a lot last week about this boxing match between Nate Diaz versus Jorge Masvidal. And we had a long discussion about the fight of the Miracle Man, Daniel Jacobs, not living up to par and not making any money about that. But he actually retired since then. So, I mean, I guess that card was bad luck for a few people because the other big story that came out of it was Nate Diaz has now filed a lawsuit against the promoter. And the promoter apparently promised Diaz $10 million, paid him $1 million only. And the card itself only brought in a $1.25 million gate. Um, oh no, that was the UFC fight between those two. Um, but the boxing match itself did horrible with pay-per-view. Either because, a lot of the people in the MMA community know how to get the free feed, or they just didn't promote it well enough. I mean, the best promotional video that came out was, the footage of the brawl between the two of them and their staff after their press conference. But Dave Meltzer of the Wrestling Observer actually called it so bad it did TNA numbers, which is the now defunct Wrestling League, Total Nonstop Action. And Jake Paul actually piped up with some comments about it. He says, I think Nate Diaz and the Masvidal lawsuit just shows how dumb these people are. This is not an easy business. Boxing is not easy. It's not easy to sell pay-per-views. If someone's giving you a big guarantee, it's most likely fraudulent. And Nate Diaz should have taken my $15 million MMA offer, but yesterday's price is not today's price. So now he needs the money. The offer goes down. And I'm still down to run it in the PFL against Nate Diaz. Says also adds, I think I'll make the transition into MMA when the opponent or an opponent wants to sign a contract. Somebody that I'm interested in fighting for my first MMA fight. And that's a name like Nate Diaz. I would be interested in fighting Mike Perry, but I want to do MMA. I love it. I have a wrestling background and I think it would be really exciting. Now, the best part about this story is not so much that Nate Diaz has filed such a quick lawsuit, but the excuses. I don't know if you guys have read anything about this lawsuit, but the excuses used by the promoter are absolutely hilarious. The main one being if he paid out that money, his wife would divorce him. It's excuses. You're gonna put it on the wife? Get the fuck out of here. That is just cheesy. That's got to be one of the lamest excuses I've ever heard for not paying fighter. He also, complained about the fight not making enough money. And that's really not on Diaz. If he's promised a certain purse that has nothing to do with percentages of MMA or whatever, that's on the promoter who fucked up in giving him that number without planning enough to make sure that he made that from the fight. I mean, whether you get it off sponsorships, whether you get it off pay-per-view and gate, it doesn't matter. You think you're going to get that, you have to back it up. And you got to give the money whether it bankrupts you or not. But he's probably going to seek bankruptcy protection to get out of this case. And I don't necessarily like it. It's not very kosher, as you might say, but it happens when you deal with these crossover fights sometimes and these hastily put together events. And
I knew Danny didn't again. So, come, like, oh, fucking me. Like, I'm not going to that. I think I mean, I'm ready for it was deserving. You pay for something like, you know, you should get more bang for your money. Um, talking to my guy like keep my dude asking about something I and I said, with this is on like 2 weeks ago, a month ago now with the Terry that was wait a minute, you had a subscription for the zone. Why are you paying for a pay per view? The original thing was you were going to get all these premium fights, like Canelo Alvarez, and that you weren't going to be paying $50, $60, $70, $80, $90. Stuff like that. You look at it just like HBO. You would get HBO, and you would get some God fights on there. You get some Mayweather fights on there. You get like Shane Mosley, guys like fighters. Like Mayweather, we're paying for it. We're paying for HBO pay-per-view. Same thing with Showtime. You know, you want to
Yes,
Showtime
ESPN Plus.
pay-per-view. You had a subscription to Showtime, but you were paying extra for it. They're the same thing, Pop.
Yeah,
And
and
you don't really got vital. Because I got my I remember the first year I got it, which would have been 2019, and 18 or 19 I got, and you were paying like $99 for the year.
yeah,
Right? And you were getting a lot, and you were getting pay-per-view quality fights. You were getting Canelo on there and shit like that. Now I think I got my renewal of $234.
yeah. It didn't help either that ESPN had free fights on the network
Yeah,
at the same
yeah.
time because I was literally watching both, and you know, we'll talk about those fights in a minute. But there was some good fights. Uh, like none of them paid off for me. I'm having bad luck with boxing, I guess, but it is what it is, right? Um,
Folks are proud.
yeah, your regions.
Fine. You're talking about find the light drop.
Yeah, because I don't even think they need to do that. The guy is doing so horribly. Everybody's telling him to quit. Yeah, and he's being stubborn. But to give you another wrestling analysis, I mean, we haven't talked about the assassination attempt at all yet, but there's so much to talk about there. We could go on for days. But one of the most outrageous accusations I heard is that, due to his close relationship with Vince McMahon, he he was smart enough to razor blade himself in the ear, and that whole thing wasn't real. But to have somebody say that after, there's a guy dead in the crowd and the shooter's been killed, that's pretty ridiculous. Pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Uh,
I
but
mean,
it was the,
you know, well, it seems like, you know, there wasn't an influence in that. I mean, someone that's a loner, someone that's a loser, someone that's, a loser, but someone that's a loner, doesn't have many friends, keeps himself, introvert, and get brainwashed him into bullshit, and then knowing he's going to get taken out, and he can never tell the kind of story.
yeah, and I thought there was almost a brawl between. I think there was almost a brawl between the CNN reporters at the scene of the rally and the supporters because they turned on him right away. And if you watched the events that day when it happened, you could see a lot of people flipping the bird towards the cameras because immediately they turned on the media because they thought, well, there's only one explanation for why this guy did this. It's because of the rhetoric on the Democratic media channels.
Mm-hmm.
And Joe Biden was criticized first and foremost for saying that we need to put Trump in the bullseye, which was not a good choice of words.
Unfortunately, I train and 42 minutes going down, 42 minutes going back. What's up? I rethink. I go on, some just mainly watch people bicker with each other. I find it entertaining. And one guy in a position with the name. And I'm not going to start with anything, so I'm not going to get too much in trouble. I see the guy, hey, give me it. I'm like, And then I think he said the one guy, we'll meet somewhere, you'll be two hit. I was like, what, you hitting me hitting the ground? I haven't heard that one before. And it's like, this guy's like, it was like late 50s, and he's like calling what late people and stuff like that. You know, like taking and calling names. I read it, I could hate myself, but some of the things that you're reading down, I'm like, I was seeing and I was taking great joy in people that were on there saying, "Oh, he missed. You had one job. Hopefully, next guy will finish the job." And they're now all getting fired from their. Oh yeah.
Well, there was
going on, and they don't like it.
Tenacious D band. Did you guys read about that? Yeah. The Jack Black group that came out of the movie? Yeah, one of his bandmates made a comment that was obviously off color and out of line, and Jack Black canceled the rest of the tour over it, which is big of him. But I mean, that's pretty unfortunate that you have to, ruin it for everybody because of one idiot saying something stupid. The other thing I thought was amazing and pretty ridiculous is that Secret Service director has not resigned yet, and she apparently said that the only reason they didn't put a Secret Service agent on the roof that the shooter was on was because it was a sloped roof. And the picture that came out after the fact of the counter sniper team that actually did the killing of the guy, they were on a sloped roof. So, how does that make any sense?
But thank God for diversity and equity. Yeah. The service is becoming very diverse. And, wow. There was an old movie came out in 1970 called Love Story. And the selling pitch was love means never having to say you're sorry. Well, being right means you never have to say you're wrong.
Yeah.
They were sorry. She's a rocket free critter. And you have an ounce piece. Just dignity. Just admit you're in over your head.
Yeah.
Sorry, was excellent. Was prestige. I mean, mistake after mistake, and then she says the buck stops here. Well, that means that you're going to assume responsibility. She's assuming.
Right.
Well, see how it goes.
Just come up with an excuse. And what the hell good is it to have a Secret Service agent inside that building? There's no fucking windows. It's a fucking manufacturing plant.
They get to the top.
Yeah.
Sometimes, the agent side have the same height they're protected. Because in the United Kingdom, they're called parents.
Yeah.
They can pull it. And they had those two women, like they were 5'4", fat, short. One couldn't hit her pickle.
Oh, I recognize that right away. I rewound that a couple times to show my girlfriend because I saw that and I was like, "Watch this girl! She can't even figure out how to get the gun." She's gone by.
We have the equity and equity.
Yeah. That's funny because I had not heard that term until this happened. This whole incident educated me on that phenomenon, which I mean, I understand it with the woke culture, but at the same time, I think it's just hilarious the way that so many people have pointed out how wrong it is, and it used to be that because of that culture, nobody would even speak up about you shouldn't have a woman in that job, because they would be considered chauvinistic. But there's so much stuff on Facebook about that now, and people pointing out and women agreeing with it that those people should not be in this job. Even the most athletic woman. One guy made the point on one of the newscasts the other night. I forget which one it was, but he said, you ask any athletic guy in any sport in the country, would you be willing to do security? for dignitaries or the president. They'd probably be like, yeah, that'd be a cool job. But you ask most women athletes the same question, they'd probably be like, hell no, they don't even want to do the job. But anyway, it was a pretty crazy scenario, and the funniest part about, if you could say there was a funniest part, was when this thing first happened, and the news media was kind of speculating about the shooter without knowing anything yet. A lot of people were saying we'll have to figure out what kind of military training this guy had. Before I even knew who the guy was, uh, they had figured out at least where he was shooting from. And I said right out loud, watching the news, I said he didn't have any military training. And it turned out that was true. I mean, he was only 20 years old. Uh, so, I mean, he would have had gone in when he was 18. And even then, he did apparently supposedly wore a lot of military clothing to school, which kind of made him an outcast. But I mean, that was because he was a hunter. Wasn't so much because he was a supporter of the military or anything like that. And the other thing was they talked about how he used to play video games in class. And I've always said some of those first person shooter games, it's dangerous, you know?
You know what? You and I had the same time started on car in the early 80s, and you had it. And you had some shooting games when I was on. With,
Don't
OG
age us or
on it.
anything, Tony.
And
Jeez.
you had those games like you had like Contra, or you had what was the other one? You had like well, Dragon wasn't a shooting game, but it was a fighting game.
Was at the end,
Where you were
guy had a giant machine gun at the end.
was it in Double Dragon?
Yeah, the final boss, remember? He had that huge machine gun.
Oh,
That's what made it so hard to beat him.
like then you went like this was like second gen. When you got like you really like and you're online, that's where it got like I remember even as a kid playing all these video games like that it was like social because you had a Genesis or a Nintendo or whatever and you wanted to have like tournaments with your friends, couldn't do it online. There was no such thing. You had to get you'd have like maybe you do like a sleep night off, and everybody would play video games at night at the time. You were interacting, you were having a good time. Now it's like you get these kids generally play by themselves. The POV shooting these Grand Theft Autos, which glamorizes
Call of
stealing
Duty.
cars,
Big one.
assaulting people, killing people. I mean, that gives you any sense of reality.
Right.
So even like now you see a lot of these school shooters, a lot of them are usually players, and they're usually people like, hey, I'm gonna try to get the higher score.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
went to school and shot 20 kids. Well, I want to
Right. And then the other thing is, as soon as you die, you boom, back to life in those games. So obviously it should be logically impossible that that happens in real life. But I mean, these kids play enough of it, they get that mentality.
out.
There's no chance I'm gonna die. I'll just respawn.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that was a big factor in it. He did go to the range a lot. Apparently, initially they said he stole his father's gun to do this, but um, the reports recently are saying that he hid the gun that he used from his parents. So I don't know what the real story is there. There was also conflicting reports about whether he had explosives in the car and at his house or not. There were some reports that said there was a harmless device that was exploded in his vehicle. Another report said he had transmitters and everything on him to remotely blow those explosives up. I don't know. There's a lot of cloudiness involved in the reporting, but one guy posted on Facebook today a picture of all the big assassination people and Lee Harvey Oswald and such and such. And he was like, they were all called loners, but most of them really weren't. And do you really believe this guy was a loner? Well, yeah, I do. If he had an accomplice, it was only could be the guy that or the girl that ordered the sniper teams to stand down, the counter sniper teams, because honestly, that's the only thing that allowed him to make those shots was the fact that, I mean, people pointed him out on the ground. Supposedly, a law enforcement officer climbed up to the roof, and the guy pointed a gun at him, so he went back down. So there was a big failure in the fact that those guys could not communicate directly with the Secret Service, number one. And number two, the Secret Service supposedly had him in their sights long before he fired a shot. But they didn't want to take the shot for fear of him maybe being a photographer trying to get a good shot, uh, which is crazy to me. I mean, how could you be a trained counter sniper and not be able to recognize a guy with a gun on a roof which has no other people on it? It just blows my mind. So I don't see how somebody in the Secret Service doesn't get fired over this. We know Biden
Sure.
going to do, but Congress might. Congress might figure out a way to do it. I don't know if you guys saw the ambush video that the bunch of the congressmen put together of confronting the director of the Secret Service at the convention. That was pretty good stuff. They basically followed her right up to her private suite where they were told they couldn't go further. And they were just grilling her. Because supposedly they weren't allowed to ask a lot of questions at the session that they already had, the question and answer session they already had with her. But yeah, it's amazing. And the thing that probably amazes me the most um, is how close Trump actually came to getting that bullet right in his temple. And
Yeah.
the fact that the Border Patrol's shitty job helped him survive because he turned to look at a chart about how poorly the Border Patrol had been doing, and that literally saved his life. Uh, and unfortunately, that has kind of turned into a whole discussion about God has chosen Trump, which I don't necessarily agree is a healthy conversation to be having. Yeah, maybe if you're a devout believer, that you could say God had a hand in saving him, but to say that God has chosen Trump, I think jumps a little bit too far. God, you could say if you believe in God that he has really a hand in everything, but you know, to say that God's into politics, I don't know.
Well, you never know. I mean,
That's to me is a little cultish. Trump's followers are already being compared to a cult. We don't need to be putting that out there like it's God saying he votes Republican. But Trump actually did say that it makes him. I saw a clip tonight on Fox that he actually was speaking just I think Wednesday, and he said that it makes him appreciate God even more, which is perfectly fine. I mean, I get that. Uh, but I mean, even he would probably not say that God has chosen. That reminds me of like the old British kings back in the day who would change religions on a whim and then kill everybody that didn't agree with the religion and stuff like that. Right? It's just a little bit too far. But anyway, that's enough about Trump for now. Maybe we'll play a clip of Hogan's remarks next week or Dana White. What he gives. Oh, that's the other thing. Before I forget, the rumor has it, we have not seen it yet, but the Dana White is going to be appearing tonight. As we know, he is the president of the UFC. I think he's still part owner. He's a very fractional owner at this point, but he is going to be speaking and introducing Trump. And the rumor is that he's going to give Trump a copy of the bad motherfucker belt, the BMF belt. So that will be a sight to see. He'll be walking around like you at the Phillies games, Tony, without the costume. That would be a great thing to bring to his next rally. He could put it around his head to prevent another sniper. Anyway, so next thing we got to talk about is boxing results and previews. We got another gimmick crossover, whatever you want to call it, fight this weekend. We've got Jake Paul versus Mike Perry. And Jake Paul is the heavy favorite. Although I found it funny, I've actually got a bet. I had to pair it with a couple live soccer games. That was the only live event going on. I said, I want to pick Jake Paul by some decision or by some results that I think is feasible. And I'm going to pick Mike Perry, the underdog, to pair with another boxing match. So I did that. I'm going to have faith in Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. to beat Uriah Hall, which is another gimmick crossover fight going on this. I believe it's on the same card. But it would be funny if it wasn't. Uh, anyway, so I've got that, and believe it or not, Julio Cesar Chavez is the favorite, despite his recent history and being in the news for all the wrong reasons. So he's the favorite, and then Mike Perry's the underdog on that little parlay. And then I had two soccer games that won, and I had Jake Paul by decision. I believe it's like plus 250 something on DraftKings. But Jake Paul by knockout is not higher, which is odd to me because I mean he's had so many decisions. The only guys he's knocked out have been pretty much washed up MMA fighters, and Mike Perry's anything but washed up. He's undefeated in bare knuckle. So I find that hard to believe that Jake Paul by knockout is negative odds, and like negative 200 something odds too. It's crazy. So I believe that the best betting option on that one is Jake Paul by decision because it's his card, it's his promotion, and I've seen some of his training videos, and he looks in very good shape for this. And you have to also remember he has crazy reach over Mike Perry. Mike Perry's a shorter dude with short arms, and he doesn't have the advantage here of fighting with the smaller gloves so that when he goes bare knuckle, he can really do damage. He's got these big padded gloves, which he's definitely not used to. Jake's way more used to it. So I hate to be on Team Jake Paul here because I would love more than anything to see Mike Perry get his day in the sun and put Jake Paul on his ass. I just don't realistically think it's going to happen. Um, what's your thought on guys?
No, I agree with you. My heart, up, ain't fair enough.
Even in MMA, I think he would win. Now, Tony, I don't know how much Jake Paul you've seen, but what do you think?
I but on the plane. Um, you gotta open the door because of YouTube and with social media the way it is now. But it's working, and obviously it's not the big event it would have been with Mike Tyson. Um, so I mean, I don't know. I've done my party like I know Mike. So, I mean, with a guy like Jake Paul, I mean, he got a good punch, and he's been working on his craft, and he's trying to improve, he's trying to, get a good show, so you gotta respect him for that, please.
And speaking of Hulk Hogan, I saw a clip the other day where that Jake Paul and Mike Perry were sitting across from each other and they were doing their best Hulk Hogan impersonations. trash talking each other about the fight, and they appeared to be pretty chummy in that video. Um, which is kind of a red flag to me because, Jake Paul is known to have these crazy clauses in his contracts, no knockout clauses and things like that. So you never know how staged this might be, first of all. And it's second of all, uh, I just I don't think that Mike Perry like has enough experience in boxing and has had enough time to train in just pure boxing to really get to that point where he can score the knockout. But he does evidently have a chain that he's made of uh, big shiny boxing glove with sparkles on it, blasting Paul's head in the face, and blood everywhere and all that. So it's like supposed to represent him knocking out Jake Paul. So he has the belief, and as we know from some of these UFC fighters who have come from nothing and turned out to be champions, that self belief is very powerful. And people underestimate it, but look at a guy like Sean O'Malley. That guy has just unwavering self belief, and it works for him. You know, Somehow he strings these wins together, and he shows he's capable. And he literally kind of came out of nowhere, uh, and people hated him a little bit for a while because he was so cocky, but it works. So I will not put it past Mike Perry. That's why I did put a bet on him. So anyway, Alexis Roca in action tomorrow night on Tony's favorite network, The Zone. From Fantasy. Okay. Alexis Roca coming in at 24-2, fighting Santiago Dominguez, undefeated at 27-0. But Roca is the higher ranked fighter for some reason. He is number 17 at welterweight. Dominguez is number 61. So I don't know whether they base that on quality of opposition or what, but Dominguez is undefeated. We'll see how that goes. Saturday, we have one from Argentina worth mentioning. It's not really world beaters in action, but we got Alan Abel Chavez, 16-0, against Zolasani Endogini, who is 32-5 at lightweight. Let's see. We got the IBF Australasian lightweight title on the line between Ibrahim Bala, 16-2, and Jalen Tate, who is 15-0. Let's get to the good stuff. Okay. ESPN Plus has a card from Tokyo, believe it or not, on Saturday, which is crazy because usually Tokyo fights are on Sunday. So this one's on Saturday on ESPN Plus. Kosei Tanaka, 20-1, fighting Jonathan Rodriguez, who's 25-2-1 for the WBO World Super Flyweight title. And they don't have those guys' rankings for some reason. Then we got Junto Nakatani, who is the WBC World Bantamweight Champion. He's 27-0, fighting Vincent Astrolabio, who is 19-4, and he's ranked number 11 at Bantamweight. And we got Riku Kano, 22-4-2, fighting Anthony Olasquaga, who is only 6-1. If it wasn't a winning record, we could call that the mismatch of the week, I guess. But that's actually for a title, too. The WBO World Flyweight title, which is vacant. I don't know how you end up finding a guy who's 6-1 to fight for a title. He is ranked number 18 in the world for some reason. Maybe he has a lot of amateur fights. But the guy he's fighting has a better record. He's ranked number 55. Sometimes boxing is weird like that. All right. We got a really big championship fight card over in Birmingham, England this weekend. Nathan Heaney versus Brad Pauls, fighting for the BBBFC British middleweight title. Heaney is 18-0-1. Paul's is 18-1-1. So virtually identical there. Good matchup on paper. And then we got a guy named Ashley fighting Andrew Kane. Ashley Lane, he is 18-10-2. Andrew Kane, his opponent, is 11-1. That's for a couple local titles there. And we got a female fight. Chantel Cameron, 18-1 against Elhem Mekhaled, 17-2 at super lightweight. Oh, I just noticed they have the female symbol. That's why they don't do the female title when it's a female title. They got the little biological symbol of female on box racks. It's the first time I'm noticing that. That's how you know. That's for the WBC Interim World Super Lightweight title for females, which is vacant. Okay. And then we got Owen Cooper, undefeated, 10-0 against Ikao Essuman, who is 19-1 at welterweight. That's for the WBO European welterweight title and a local British title. And really, that's about it, except for a super middleweight fight here. Number 22 in the world, Zach Parker, 24-1, fighting Jack Arnfield, who is 26-3. And he's ranked number 141 in the world. Yikes. And then we got the DAZN card from Tampa. I believe that's the same card that Jake Paul versus Mike Perry is on. But they don't list him here because it's probably an exhibition, I'm thinking. But the only reason I say this is probably that card is because Amanda Serrano's on it, and I know Jake represents her. Amanda, former guest of ours, she is 46-2-1, fighting Stevie Morgan, who is 4-1. And I don't think Morgan has much of a chance. That is our mismatch of the week, hands down. And I believe Amanda Serrano's odds of winning that are like minus 5,000. So it's not a good fight to bet on. Also on that card, we got somebody's always got to go at lightweight male fight. Ashton Silve, 11-0, fighting Lucas Body, who is 16-0. We also have another one at lightweight. Tony Aguilar, 12-0-1 against Corey Marksman, 9-0-1. It's a good name for a fighter, Marksman. And that's it till next week. Let's go to the results. So last weekend, one of the biggest fights we had was Muratalla versus Tevin Farmer. Well, that's not really one of the biggest fights, but it was one of the fights we mentioned last week anyway. Muratalla stayed undefeated, 21-0 now. Tevin Farmer moves to 33-6-1. And the NABF lightweight title and the WBO NABO lightweight title go to Muratalla. Also,
I um, Canada close and I put it back in.
right. It happens a lot. It happens a lot. So much more politics in boxing than the other combat sport. That was in Vegas too, so explains everything. And then there was a big upset um, that cost me some money because I had Ruben Villa winning on a live bet, which the odds had actually evened up at that point in the fight. I don't know which round it was when I placed the bet, but I had Jaron Edis inside 6 rounds to win by knockout or by stoppage, and Ruben Villa to win. And of course, Jaron Edis came through, but Ruben did not. He falls to 22-2 and was beaten by Suleiman Sagawa, who was just 16-4 with one draw going into that fight, and he's now 17-4 and owns the WBC silver featherweight title. So, guess I should have gone with the underdog on that one. So, unanimous decision win for Suleiman Sagawa. And then in your home city, Tony, we had Jaron Ennis, as I said, stopping David Avanesian in the fifth of 12 for the IBF World Welterweight title. Ennis improves to 32-0. Does not look like he's going to be beaten anytime soon. Avanesian was sort of a journeyman fighter anyway, not really expected to win. But
I can't believe he did a really good effort. And from watching that fight, you could tell Boots was in control from the beginning. Evan didn't tell him to lie down. Got to give him pop on that. Yeah. So, he didn't work. Boots was landing some salacious body shots. Could feel one of them in the first round did stray low, but I came to push his head down and Boots below the belt. Reminiscent of good Andrew Gallant blow. Boots was landing some good shots. You could see Evan swelling up. You were thinking, but he landed some punches in there. And the pivotal punch in the fifth round, surely for the stoppage, was Evan was pushing Boots back to the ropes. And with a top stand, Evanesian landed a nice looping right hand. But he was slow bringing his right hand back, and Boots came up top with the counter left hand off through. So, Evanesian went down, got up, and you could see he slowed up immediately. Went to the corner after that, and came in. Working from that place. You could see there were times where looked a little rusty. He'd been off for that. Got hit with the punches. Maybe he sort of avoided, but he stood in the top at the time. Maybe he shouldn't have. Gave the guy opportunity. Maybe he didn't need to. But overall, what can you say? Unfortunately, I was not able to make it down there. My original plan was I was going to try to leave in the afternoon, change, bring a change of clothes in my car, which I normally don't go out down there anyway. I was going to do that, bring a change of clothes, then go to the fight. But I knew my dad wouldn't be able to. He wouldn't be up for it. He's really having a hard time with my shoulder surgery. And when we do Philly's game, there's some days you're really, really, really fatigued. So I knew he couldn't do a full day. And then even with the boxing fight, I just knew it would have been a little bit of a long day for him. So we decided, hey, let's hang out at home. We'll watch together. We'll fight, night. And that's what we did. And Tony, Boots looked something good. I said that too. Yeah, almost like two different. And I noticed he was lifting some weights in his training, and it kind of puts the shatters the myth and don't lift weights. It slows you down. But Boots is he's in a gym now. He's going to have to move up, I would think, because what else is left at 147? Mm. Yeah, really, with guys like, Crawford moving with no, the stats on his bench right now continues to tell how good he looks. So you're right, a lot of your welterweights are now abandoning that weight class. Yeah.
All right. We also had a blockbuster female fight on that card. WBC featherweight title on the line. Diana Vargas came in as the more experienced fighter. Just one loss to 19 wins, but she fell by unanimous decision to Sky Nicholson. She just came in undefeated at 10-0. And that was in
She's down fighter. Can't hear me. Like, I'm trying to step on that stand. She really right-handed. Because they were saying, like, with her left hand, her trail hand, she doesn't usually commit to it. She'll throw it like a sharp, almost like a lead right, but she doesn't put like a whole lot of knockout power in it. Right hand, that jab, man, it was like a telephone ball. Reminded me like a George Foreman jab, something lifting jab. And I'm like, I think she's right-handed. I think she's right-handed boxing out of the southpaw hand. That backhand had very little stuff. And had a lot.
Yeah. Well, of course, I googled it and it says she's left-handed, but I mean, that's just because she boxes left-handed. uh, yeah, yeah. She's a lot of fighters though. At least are trained to be able to switch stances. Of course, the most famous example isn't even a real fighter. It's Rocky, the Rocky movies. You know, when Rocky had his arm taped to his side to try to fight a southpaw. But I always taught fighters, and it wasn't necessarily because they might get injured on the hand that's most powerful. I wanted all my fighters to know how to be able to box southpaw or traditional stance. Just because sometimes that happens. Fighters who are right-handed box better naturally left-handed. It does happen. I think I had one of my fighters come up to me one day and say, could even though I'm right-handed, could I? Is it funny that I feel like I'm better left-handed? I said, no, no, it happens. Go with what does feel naturally. It kind of reminds me of water skiing too, because at one point I forgot which foot I was supposed to put in the ski first when you're taking off. And I could not for the life of me get up out of the water until I switched. Because naturally I was better with my left foot for some reason in the ski than my right foot. I thought because I was right-handed, my right foot should be in the ski, but nope, it was just like your boxing stance as a right-hander. Your left foot is forward, and you drag your right foot through the water when you're water skiing. So yeah, it's one of those phenomenons that sometimes you have people that can write with both hands too. So in that case, how do you decide which stance you fight from? Uh,
Hey, I mean, I'm right-handed. My point part with my left hand. I write with my right hand, but and I haven't written. I mean, I haven't written any work with my left hand. Well, the same level of legibility, I write answer with my right. Um,
well,
so I think, and now I think had a lot to do with power in my left foot because I can really be able to get a lot of leverage using my leg.
yeah. So you're saying like when you play kickball, you're left-footed? Okay. Well, that is a little weird.
Like, I'm not enough to right, my leg.
Yeah, I especially when I started training mixed martial arts a little bit, I was really um, a huge fan of switching stances a lot, just to confuse the other fighter. Not that I really had a lot of face-to-face fights or anything, but just in practice and everything, hitting the bag, throwing elbows, throwing kicks, it seemed very valuable to me to be able to know how to switch stances on the fly. And probably the number one reason why you need to know both stances is because you could throw an arm out. I mean, it happened to Muhammad Ali's grandson a few weeks ago. An arm fell out of the socket, basically. So he didn't necessarily switch stances, but he had to use his one hand. Uh, so you definitely should know that as either a boxer or an MMA fighter or judo, whatever. I mean, you should know both stances. Anyway. So that's the boxing results. Oh, we do have to talk about one fight from last Friday. We had an 8-rounder in Atlanta. Saul Sanchez, 20-3, improving to 21-3. Over Arthur Villanueva, falls to 35-6-1 at bantamweight. Now I'm going to the week before. We got one bit of news left before we go over the UFC fight for this weekend. Fight card, I should say. Conor McGregor, teasing is the word in the headline, a date for the new Michael Chandler fight, saying he's going to return at UFC 310, slated for December 14th in Vegas, just in time for Christmas. So, this was after a bare knuckle fighting championship press conference in Spain. He was asked by Sun Sports' Chisanga Malata if he was interested in fighting at UFC 310. That sounds good to me, he responded with a shrug of his shoulders. So I don't know if that's confirmed. I can't say it is. But MMA journalist Ariel Helwani, who is known for his scoops, did report that the UFC was eyeing the December 14th card for McGregor to come back. So that's the news as we know it, but don't quote me. Might not happen. Okay, so this weekend we have UFC on ESPN 60 from the Apex in Las Vegas. And the main event is a girl actually I witnessed put on a fantastic performance, even in a losing effort, in Boston on the Sterling versus O'Malley card. And my girlfriend actually prefers to watch female fights, and it was for one of the reasons why I used to always like interviewing female fighters and watching them fight in the local circuits, because they kind of have that chip on their shoulder, like they're fighting for all of womankind. I know I've said that before, but it's still true today, I think. Um, but at the same time, it seems like a lot of these fights are going to decision. Like it's one of the safest bets to bet to go the distance on any female fight. It seems like 9 times out of 10 you'll hit that bet unless one girl absolutely sucks and the other one's a world beater. This one, it's sort of sort of a tough day at the office for Lemos. She's going up against a very formidable opponent, a girl who looks like Rob Schneider's sister, Virna Jandiroba. I mean, a dead ringer for Rob Schneider in his younger days. But she's a female. She's a pretty strong girl. She's very good at grappling. But Amanda Lemos is just so relentless in her pursuit, and whether she's losing the fight or winning, she's just so impressive to me, her fighting style. 2 out of her last 3 wins have come by stoppage, but her last win came by decision. So I like her by money line on this one. I'm only going to pick the top 4 fights on this card, but this one I would go out on a limb and call it a lock, because I don't think Jandiroba has the all-around skills to compete with Lemos. She might last the distance, so you could also call it a lock to go the distance. But Lemos, one thing that was most impressive about her against Weili Zhang in Boston was she came very close a few times to getting that guillotine submission. She's very good at that submission. So if it doesn't go the distance, just in case, I'm going to go Lemos by money line. I think that's a safe bet. And another possible winning bet would be Lemos by submission. And the other one I'm gonna go out on a limb with Brad Tavares versus the Iron Turtle, one of my favorite nicknames. John Young Park, he calls himself the Iron Turtle, and he is capable of knockout or submission, depending on which day it is and how he feels. Uh, he has one of the most well-rounded records as far as wins goes. 5 TKOs, 6 submissions, and 6 decisions. So he can beat you all 3 ways. His losses, most of them come by decisions. He was knocked out once, did get submitted twice, but it's very rare. Pretty tough guys have taken him out. And in his Just see, dating back to 2016, he's only lost 3 times. Once in his last fight to Andre Muniz by a split decision. And then way back in 2021, by RoboCop, they call him. Absolutely chiseled guy who actually fights like he should, not like my favorite Czech Congo comparison. Guy that's just absolutely jacked, but you just can't seem to fight very well to match up with it. And then before that, his submission loss was to Anthony Hernandez in 2019. And this is all under the UFC banner. And you have to go back to a real world beater back in the early days that he faced, Shavkat Rakhmonov, in 2016 in the feeder league. He lost by rear naked choke. And then in his debut, he lost by unanimous decision and then a split decision to Sungwon Sun in 2015 in another feeder league. So he's not really susceptible to losses. And if he does lose, typically it's close, unless it's a guy that's just actually demolishing people left and right. So his opponent is Brad Tavares, and he has 3 out of his 4 last fights were losses. And, pretty tough guys in his own right. RoboCop was one of them. TKO'd him. Bruno Silva TKO'd him. And Dricus Duplessis took him to a unanimous decision. But the only guy he's beaten is Chris Weidman, who was coming off a very long layoff and a severely broken leg. So, you look at that and you got to favor the Iron Turtle in this one. So I'm going to go money line because, like I said, Park is so well rounded. You never know how he's going to win. But he is another live dog as far as, probably what's going to be a high odds plus odds submission bet like that. So you could either go decision or submission or TKO or submission or just straight money line. Then we have Steve Garcia, the Mean Machine. He is 15-5. Only 3 of those wins by decision, 12 by knockout. And what's better than that is his last 3 fights were won by knockout, all of them in the UFC. And he's fighting Sung Woo Choi, who's 11-6. And he is pretty much either TKO or decision as far as his wins. And the big red flag for me is 3 of his last 4 were losses. 2 of them were stoppages. 2 of those losses were stoppages. And he lost to Bruce Leroy by submission, which doesn't happen often. So I'm going to go with Steve by knockout. By knockout or decision. Let's go with that. It's a little bit better chances of winning on that one. And then the 4th fight is Kurt Holobaugh versus Kenan Kruszewski. Usually the W is a V sound. Kruszewski 15-2, Holobaugh 20-8. And Holobaugh is kind of the definition of a journeyman. He's had quite the journey. He's actually gone from feeder league to the UFC, back to the feeder leagues, back to the UFC, and then back to the feeder leagues and back to the UFC. He's got 2 fights in recent years, 2023 one and 2024, the other one in March here this year. And he's had a win by triangle choke and a unanimous decision loss to what Tom would call no cheap date, Trey Ogden. And really, he's fought a real who's who of MMA. Fought a pretty good, considerable amount of his fights in the UFC. He's had 1 Strikeforce fight. And he's had a lot of these feeder league fights, but Kruszewski is really not very experienced. He's coming off the Dana White Contender Series, and he lost to a guy named Elvis Brenner in his debut in the UFC by 1st round knockout. So I'm going to have to go with Holobaugh, and I'm going to go money line. Nice, easy 4-leg parlay right there. But I have not had time to analyze the rest of them. But we got Cody Durden, 16-5-1, fighting Bruno Silva, 13-5-2 in the 8th fight of the night. And then featherweight, that's a flyweight fight. Featherweights, Do Ho Choi, 14-4-1, fighting Bill Algeo, 18-8. Jung Young Lee, 11-1, fighting Haider Emil, who's 9-0. I don't know what the deal with this. All these Asian fighters on the card. Is it like Asian Independence Week or something? It'd be one thing if this was in Asia, but it's in Vegas, so kind of weird. Anyway, Brian Kelleher in the 5th fight of the night. He is 24-15 at bantamweight, fighting Cody Gibson, who's 19-10. And then we got Miranda Maverick, 13-5, fighting Dion Barbosa, who is 7-2 at flyweight. Loic Radzhabov at lightweight, 18-5-1, fighting Trey Ogden, who we just talked about, 17-6 at lightweight. Then second fight of the night, Luana Carolina, 10-4 at bantamweight, fighting Lucy Pudilova, who is 14-9. And then we got the brother of the most well-known Usman, Kamaru Usman. He is Muhammad Usman, who is 10-3, fighting Thomas Peterson, 8-2 at heavyweight. And Usman's another one of those absolutely jacked guys who you'd think would just walk through everybody, but he has his difficulties. He did have a 3-fight winning streak going into his last fight, but ended up losing that one by unanimous decision. And he's been in the UFC for a total of 4 fights, and he only has the 1 knockout in his debut, which was a second round knockout. So not a guarantee to get the knockout. But also not a submission artist either. So I definitely, if I'm going to bet on him, which is probably a good bet, I'd go knockout or decision, just in case he finds that power. There's a big dude. They call him the Motor. Thomas Peterson, I really don't know that much about. He does have 7 of 8 wins by knockout, and the 1 other win by submission. But he lost to Jamal Pogues in his last fight by unanimous decision, and he's very new to the UFC. That was just his first fight off the Contender Series, getting him a contract on a submission win in the second round over a guy I've never heard of. And he does have the 1 loss prior to his UFC debut, though, was to a pretty formidable opponent. That was Where's Waldo Cortez Acosta, who is putting together a pretty good UFC career so far. Only lost once since his debut in 2022 against Jared Vanderaa. So, don't underestimate Muhammad's opponent there. Anyway, I think that's all for us. We got to get to watching the UFC president here, about to introduce Trump.
On, Trump.
So,
Production red.
thanks for stopping by.